Yesterday was Margaret Thatcher's centenary. It would have been her 100th birthday. Last night, the great and good of the right-wing establishment of Britain gathered at the Guildhall in central London, and I spoke to a lot of them. We have former prime ministers, former cabinet ministers, former colleagues of Margaret Thatcher, giving their view on what she would have done differently, what she thought of Donald Trump, and how Margaret Thatcher would have saved the West if she was with us today. Howard.
Hey, how are you?
What would Margaret Thatcher make of the state of the West?
I think she'd be appalled by the mush and the lack of clarity that there is at the moment about the difference between democracies and totalitarian countries and the difference between freedom and tyranny. And, I think that we need her vigour and her courage today in standing up to tyranny, particularly, obviously, in Ukraine. But you've got a world now where people out demonstrating on the streets of London genuinely seem to think that Hamas is preference to democracy in Israel. And you've got conservative commentators and, leaders of some so-called conservative parties who are willing to make apologies for Vladimir Putin.
I think she would be quite unhappy with it, but I think she'd be very happy with what happened today, with all the hostages being released. I think that was very wonderful.
I think she would recognise it immediately. From 1975 to 1979, we were in much the same kind of problems that we are in today. So I don't think she'd have any trouble whatsoever in recognising the state of the nation.
I think she would have been really upset to see where the country has got to. I think that we face some very serious challenges. It is still the greatest country in the world. Our people are the greatest people in the world, but things are tough, and I think that she would have been upset about that.
Well, in my reform speech, I used a lot of Margaret Thatcher's quotes. I attended the parade through the city. I think she was an inspiration to all of us, and she took over after years of socialism had damaged Britain beyond belief. And she reinstated a sort of self-belief. She cut back the size of the state and she empowered the individual. And I think, as she says herself, she's a conviction politician, not a consensus politician. I think we need a bit of conviction now.
Well, she didn't stamp her political philosophy on the nation. She was shaped by it. That's the remarkable thing about her. So she would have loved it, and she would have still had hope in her heart for all it could be. And I think at a time when people are fed up of transactional politics, they would welcome her back. They would want someone that could transform the country, because that's what it needs right now. Pace of change is so chaotic, it's so fast, people are frightened, and they want political leaders, whatever their political hue, to get stuff done, to fix stuff, to focus on the pragmatic things that work, and that's what she did.
I think she would have been pretty unimpressed with the conduct of the present government, and I think she would have been particularly disappointed to see the complete lack of any sort of grip on the economy, any sense of how to turn things around. Of course, she fought those huge battles against inflation and to tame the overmighty trade unions and bring some productivity and growth back to the country, and just feels at the moment as though a great deal of her legacy is being very slowly dismantled.
Well, she'd have said it's a trip down memory lane, wouldn't she? Just like it was between 1975 and 79.
She turned things around.
In some ways even worse, I think.
Don't Keir Starmer's the man to turn it around?
Absolutely not, no. He's the man who needs to be turned round and out.
I think she'd have been appalled. I think she'd have wanted everyone to roll up their sleeves and get back to work. The country's in an absolute
I
mess.
didn't mean the party. I meant the state of the nation.
Oh, even worse. She'd be even more appalled. I remember the one thing I learnt when the bit of work I did with her, she always used to say, what am I going to do, not what am I going to say. We are ruled currently by people who think, what are we going to say? They don't have a bloody clue what they're going to do, and that's what we're missing.
She would be, I think, deeply despondent about the financial mismanagement of our country, of the social fragmentation of our country, of a country that she would see had changed, not beyond recognition, but moving certainly in the wrong direction.
I think she'd be in despair about the state of this Labour government, but she'd have a spring in her step after some good, sound Conservative policies unveiled last week, like abolishing stamp duty.
Britain today would have reminded her very much of the state of Britain when she became Conservative leader. A failed Tory administration, which had presided over an increase in spending and had shown little backbone, followed by a cataclysmic Labour administration that had bankrupted the country. And the question is, have we got someone who can play her role now?
Do you think we do?
Very few people saw her coming. So, yes, there is always that possibility. But I think she was exceptional. I have the unfashionable view that, maybe not unfashionable here, but unfashionable in general, that she was our single greatest Prime Minister. I know it's always considered obligatory to preface that with a qualifier. The greatest peacetime Prime Minister, greatest...
Greater than Churchill?
Yes, because obviously he had a much bigger stage. And he got a very big and important call right in 1940. But I think we saw in the Falklands that she'd have made that same call.
Yes.
But she didn't then have his catastrophic second premiership. And although she was flawed and imperfect, as all human beings are, she didn't contract out a lot of her administration was basically undoing the stuff that Attlee had put in place under Churchill from 1940. Yes. So I think on balance, yes, I will stand by that claim.
How would Margaret Thatcher stop the boats?
She'd probably sink them. But that said, it's always very dangerous, obviously, to pretend that you know what a dead person would think about anything at all. But she was tremendously tough on immigration. It was one of the founding principles of her 1979 electoral victory. She was so sound on it, frankly, that no party to the right could exist in that election. And so, of course, it's totally different from today, where we have a party to the right of the Conservatives. She would not have allowed enough of a gap to develop.
Oh, she'd have called the First Sea Lord and said, what do you think of this? She'd have treated it in a very pragmatic way, almost like a military campaign. She wouldn't have focused on the northern border, she'd have focused on the southern border of France. She'd have looked at what was required, and she would have had the political will to do it, I've no doubt.
Even that means leaving the ECHR, tearing up various treaties?
She knew what the country needed, and we forget, we take a lot of the things that she did as perfectly normal. Just what she did on income tax was so dramatic, it was unfathomable at the time. She did those things, and she radically transformed the country. And the reason why she was successful is because all of those reforms were rooted in what people knew about. They were rooted in the traditional, the familiar. They were reassuring to people.
She would have found a way of tackling it. And I think that's the point about Margaret Thatcher. She didn't take no for an answer. She would have stood up. She would have made sure that she built the necessary alliance.
Even if walking away from the ECHR and leaving the Strasbourg?
Well, obviously they're very different times now. I think now you've got a very wide coalition starting to assemble, accepting that ECHR needs to, at the very least, be changed very dramatically, with people like Jack Straw and David Blunkett saying that, and Lord Sumption as well.
Well, she didn't have the problem of the quangocracy that we had. We forget that she had a civil service that was still operating according to the Armstrong principles, and the Armstrong principles said, whatever the minister says goes.
Yeah.
Now we have not only a judiciary that is determined always and everywhere to overturn deportation orders, but it was very telling that the Home Office trade union was the one that brought the case against the Rwanda policy. That kind of tells you everything you need to know about the people whose job it is to carry out this policy.
That's the blob right there.
That's the blob right there. And in a way, she was dealing, yes, with entrenched enemies in the trade union and movement and in the more sort of high-spending parts of the state, but they were not embedded in our establishment and judiciary and civil service in the way that they are now.
She believed in sovereign nations and the sovereignty of borders, and I don't think she'd be tolerating this mass immigration invasion, which is now a national crisis.
I don't think she'd have let them come over in the first place, and she would have said very clearly to France, take them back, otherwise there's going to be a serious negotiation. She wouldn't have tolerated it.
Send it in the Navy, do you reckon?
Oh, I mean, she had a reputation of using the Navy, and she was quite good at it.
Do you think she would have told the ECHR where to go?
Well, I think she would have been on the side of those of us who voted and campaigned to leave the European Union.
Yeah.
And if there was a political remnant, the ECHR, then why would we take the huge step of leaving the European Union, but not the much smaller step of leaving the convention and rights?
I think it is fair to say the ECHR, which was born at a time when we were thinking about the ashes of Bergen-Belsen, we're in a totally different era now. And I think evolution is an important thing, something that she would have believed in. So, listen, I think she would have listened very carefully to what Kemi had to say, and I think she would have found a lot in it which she approved of.
What do you think that she would have made of Nigel Farage and his, well, A, his politics, and B, his style of politics?
I think she'd have quite enjoyed the personality and the populism of Nigel Farage, but she would have absolutely despised the economic story that he's telling. The idea that he wants to renationalise steel, he wants to splurge on the NHS, he wants to take people out of taxation to such an extent it's going to give us an £80 billion black hole. All of those things she would see as the worst kind of populism.
6 million people out of work on sickness benefits. 40% of our day-to-day spending is going to be on the NHS by the end of this decade. We're spending more on debt interest than the combination of our borders, our defences and our education. The scale of the problems facing this country today dwarf anything seen before.
No, 1975 to 79 also had us with the IMF coming in. You're too young to remember this, Harry. I'm not. I do remember it very well. And we had the IMF, we had top rate of income tax at 98%. We had a nation that was basically collapsing and falling under the control of the trade unions. So she was able to deal with all of those things, and she did it by sticking to her principles and being a highly intelligent and eloquent believer in freedom.
What would she have made of Donald Trump?
I think there's almost a marriage made in heaven in that one. I think they are both conviction politicians. You know what you get. And I wish she'd seen, because the progress he's made today, we're talking the day after he's been through Israel and he's in Egypt, that is exactly the sort of thing she brought. A conviction politician. Doesn't care what people think about it. She believes in something, he believes in something, they're going to get it done.
What do you think? Obviously she had an incredibly close relationship with Ronald Reagan. What do you think she would have made of Donald Trump?
I wonder whether or not she wouldn't have charmed the pants off Donald Trump. I think that she was one of those people who, as you say, got on very well with Ronald Reagan and indeed with George W. Bush H.W. Bush afterwards. She knew that it's part of the British Prime Minister's job to get on with the American president. I don't think that she would have minded dealing with a populist president like Trump.
I think he would have met his match, wouldn't he?
He'd have loved her. He'd have absolutely loved her. We wouldn't have had that kind of awkwardness that we got with Theresa May and Donald Trump. I think that they would have been a match made in heaven. And he wouldn't have even noticed when it turned out that he was starting to do things from British national interest rather than the American national.
I think she'd have recognised the necessity of dealing with him. I think she would have, like Matilda's aunt in the poem, she professed a strict regard for truth. I think she'd have found him personally pretty difficult.
But, you could see some similarities there in the second term anyway, moving fast and breaking things and, only taking the half of the country that you need with you to get things done. It's a match made in heaven.
I don't think she'd have objected to that element, but I think she would have regarded his character as below what she expected. She had this quite strong sort of old Methodist sense of decency, and she expected standards from other people. And although she could be forgiving, she didn't expect repeat offenders to be rewarded for it.
I think they'd have got on like a house on fire, and I think that he would have been a little bit frightened of her.
And maybe he would have bent to her will?
I think that she was charming and persuasive in her argument in equal measure. I think they would have gone on well. And yes, and I hope, he's had an incredible day today, and I hope that perhaps he will reflect on her legacy as well on this momentous occasion.
Well, you've seen what he's done. He's shown us how to do it, and he's done an extremely good job of protecting the interests of the American electorate, and I think credit to him.
So you think our politicians here could learn a thing or two from Trump?
Well, they don't want to think they can, but I think there probably is quite a lot I mean, not everything about Trump is good, but I think his leadership and self-belief gives the American nation a belief that it can actually stop this sort of relentless downward post-war decline, which the West has effectively allowed to happen in order to lubricate the wheels of global trade. And I think he's showing us that actually you need to put your own voters and your own citizens before worrying about sort of global welfare. So you can't look after everybody if you yourself are weak.
She would have, that's a very good question. Should have found him a strong leader, like unpredictable, but equally that's what they said about Ronald Reagan, and she got on brilliantly with Ronald Reagan. So she could get on with people who were strong leaders, who had a clear conviction about what's right for the United States and for the United Kingdom.
What do you think she would have made of Donald Trump generally? Do you think they would have got on?
I think they'd have got on, yes. She got on very well with Ronald Reagan, I know. And when I went to meet Ronald Reagan, he said, "How's my little gal, Maggie?" So he liked her, yeah. I think she was inspirational. That's why I'm here, making a speech about her.